What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm bringing you my 8 tips or tricks for your upcoming fantasy drafts. Now, some of you may have already had your drafts. I should have probably came out with this video earlier, but hey, better late than never. When I'm making this list, I don't want to choose the same cookie cutter, easy tips that you'll get from other draft lists. You'll get the check the bye weeks. You don't have to fill out your starting position. That's a lot of basic stuff. This is a little bit more, not necessarily advanced, but this is going to be some tricks, some tips or tricks to do before the draft and in your draft, some strategy to follow. So let's get right into it. So my first tip is to make your own rankings. Now, I think generally people, what they like to do is just get the ESPN, Yahoo, whatever, top 300 players or the top positional rankings and just kind of go off that list. And the reason why I want you to make your own rankings is, we'll talk about in a little bit, but is so you can see where you have different values compared to the market. Like I said, we'll talk about that in a moment, but that's the main reason why I want you to make your own rankings. I don't need you to make, 100, rank your top 100 running backs, then your wide receivers, and your top, 30 quarterback. That's way too many. I did a draft this past weekend, and I did a list of just my top 50 players. That's your first, 4 rounds? 3-4 rounds. So you don't need to go that deep. I have a draft this upcoming weekend. I'm going to go a little bit deeper for that one. But for this first draft, I just did 50 players. Maybe 25 wide receivers, 25 running backs, 10 tight ends, 10 quarterbacks would be pretty good. Rule number 2 for me is to do mock drafts. Now, you don't have to do 30 mock drafts, but the reason you do mock drafts is you look at your ranking sheet, and based off your rankings, you can see where you have positional differences at, where you have rank differences from the market and, whatever platform you play on, whether it's ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, all these other platforms. Personally, for me, I have Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton is going at, I believe, in the 5th round, and, that's what his ADP is. But I have him as my 13th wide receiver, so that's going to be in the 2nd, 3rd round for me. This will lead into my next rule, my number 3 rule, which is have a plan for your draft. You don't necessarily have to have a plan that's set in stone, because drafts don't always work out the way you want them to. But if you know where players are going, like I have, for instance, like I said, Courtland Sutton as my 13 ranked receiver, most people have him ranked in the 25 to 30 range. Now, since that's going to happen, I don't need to reach for Courtland Sutton. I know that I can get Courtland Sutton a little bit later, so I can take other guys ahead of him that I have ranked in the same ballpark that are going earlier. If I have Adam Thielen ranked 13th and I have Courtland Sutton ranked 12th, and Adam Thielen's going in the 3rd round and Courtland Sutton's not going into the 5th, with my 3rd round pick, I'll take Adam Thielen, and then maybe in my 4th or 5th round, I'll take Courtland Sutton. That way I can get both. There's no point in reaching for Courtland Sutton in the 3rd when I know I can get him later. That way I can get both players. My 4th rule is don't reach for a position. That's the common theme this year is you need to get running backs early. You really do need to. If you have the 5th pick in your draft and in your rankings and your top 4 RBs are gone off your list. So you have the 5th pick and your top 4 RBs are gone. Don't reach and take the 5th when your wide receiver 1 is still there. Unless you have, your 5 RBs ranked above your number 1 receiver. Don't reach for a running back because you feel you need to get a great one. In my draft, personally, the past weekend, I had the 10th pick out of 12. I really wanted Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs. I went in with the mindset of I need 2 RBs. But what happened was the first 5 picks went, then Michael Thomas, then running back, my pick. I took Josh Jacobs, came around, running back. A receiver went right before me, and Tyreek Hill is still on the board for me. Tyreek Hill is my number 2 wide receiver this year. If I didn't take Tyreek Hill, I was going to take another running back. If I took a running back, it was Kenyon Drake. Am I really going to reach for my 13th ranked running back when my wide receiver 2 is sitting there in Tyreek Hill? I just think that's dumb. I just think that you're pushing for a position that you don't need to do. You don't need to reach for an unsure Kenyon Drake when you have Tyreek Hill, who, if healthy, is going to probably finish as a top 10, at least top 5, wide receiver, pretty much guaranteed if he's healthy. So don't reach for a position. You can win doing multiple strategies. You don't need the running backs like everyone claims you do. You're safe if you go with wide receiver. And my number 5 rule is to be ready to deviate from your plan. I kind of just said this rule, but I want to elaborate a little bit more. Now, a lot of people come into the drafts having done mock drafts. They've done multiple mock drafts and really tested out the strategy, and they have a plan. You don't need to necessarily have the set in stone plan like I said earlier, but you can't be afraid to deviate from your original plan. Like I did. In this draft, I mean, you'll see. I wanted to get 2 RBs. I even said that. I wanted Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs, or at least, another running back other than just Josh Jacobs. But I just couldn't pass up on Tyreek Hill. Odell Beckham came around. Cooper Kupp, who I have as a top 10 wide receiver this year, I got him in the 4th round for me. These are just too high of values where I could have got Leonard Fournette, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon, but they're really risky to me. Why not take the wide receivers that I'm super confident in and be so sure then to reach for these other guys? I deviated from my plan, and I really like the way my team turned out. Is my RB2 a little bit shaky? Of course he is. If DeAndre Swift doesn't turn out to be the best, RB in the world, I still have 3 really good wide receivers and a great RB1 in Josh Jacobs that I think can carry my team to a championship. My 6th rule is don't draft a QB early in rounds 1 through 3. Unless you're in an 8-team or smaller league, a super flex, which is where you can play a quarterback at your flex position, or a 2 QB league where you're forced to start 2 quarterbacks. The QB 1 and 2 usually don't differentiate themselves enough from the quarterback number 5 through 12 to be worth that early of a pick. Usually QB 1 from the previous season, doesn't really repeat as the QB 1 the next season. So it's so hard to really get that number 1 QB. And if you're going to take a guy early, he has to finish as the QB 1 and really be a big difference from the QB 2, 3, 4, and 5. He has to be a big difference maker. And this kind of leads in my rule number 7, which is if you do go against my wishes and draft a QB in the first, 1, 2, or 3 rounds, don't draft a tight end in the top 3 rounds also. Or vice versa. If you go with an early tight end in rounds 1, 2, 3, do not go quarterback. Your team, you can survive if you do take a quarterback early. I don't recommend it because you really miss out on a big, really good wide receiver or running back. You can't live. Your team will not be good enough. It will not survive if you draft a quarterback and tight end with your, 2 out of your 3 early round picks. Your team will just not have enough depth. It won't have enough star power at the big positions that you need to survive. My 8th and final rule is to balance out your team. And what I mean by this is the big mistake that I see in fantasy owners is they either make their team way too risky or way too safe. If you take players like, it could be a lot of things. It can be injury risk, like Dalvin Cook. He hasn't played a full season yet. Chris Carson gets hurt every year. AJ Green, he hasn't played in a long time. Or maybe you have 1-year wonders and rookies. Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. All these guys are going to be starters for your team. If you go with a player who's risky as your RB1 or wide receiver 1, try backing him up with a safer player. For instance, if you go with, Aaron Jones as your RB1, try to go with a safer running back a little bit later, or, wide receiver, for instance, too. If you go with someone like Juju Smith-Schuster, who we have no idea what's going to happen, he could either blow up or come completely crashing down and ruin your team. Or you go with, the high upside. If that guy's going to end up being one of your starters, try going with a receiver like DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett. We don't know, or I don't think we really expect these guys to be, 1,500-yard receivers pushing, double-digit touchdowns. But we think they're going to get over 1,000 and probably catch 5 to 6 touchdowns with, probably 80 to 100 catches. They're going to be safe. They don't really have a ton of upside, but like I said, they're safe. They counteract the riskiness. They're there to help, when your risky player like AJ Green has a bad week, what you're going to get out of these guys. And vice versa. If you draft the DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett to be your wide receiver 1s or your wide receiver 2s, don't be afraid to take a risky player. Don't be afraid to, since you have the safe player, to do the opposite and grab another risky player. Because if that blows up, you're looking good. Relate it back to my NFL draft, fantasy football draft. I took Odell Beckham in the 3rd round. You know, I had Tyreek Hill, who I loved, so I went, you know what? Screw it. I'm going for the big boom. I'm going for Odell Beckham. If Odell Beckham can return to be, you know, a top 5 wide receiver, my team's going to look really good. And then I came back around because I got Odell Beckham, and I wanted a safer player, and I felt really comfortable with Cooper Kupp there. So I took Cooper Kupp. So now I feel like I have 2 safe receivers, with Odell Beckham being my shot. You know, he is the coin flip. He's the guy that he might work out, he might not. But if he doesn't work out, I know I'm still feeling pretty comfortable with 2 wide receivers and Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, who I know will, you know, kind of save me on weeks where Odell might have a bad week. I originally said I only had 8 rules, but I came up with this one on the spot. My rule number 9 and my actual final rule is do not listen to what the people say about your team in the draft. Nobody knows anything. People are going to say that your team sucks, your team's trash, but really, we have no idea. The season hasn't even started yet. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. So many outcomes can happen this year. This is going to be the most, you know, chaotic year of fantasy football that we probably have ever had. So don't look at your team and go, oh, I wish I did this, I wish I did that. You drafted your team, let's roll with it. And if you start out slow, you can always make trades later. Alrighty, those are my fantasy football draft tips and tricks. This is the end of the road for our, you know, lead up to the season. You know, fantasy drafts are this weekend, and our first game is next Thursday. I mean, Chiefs versus Texans. It's going to be a good game. I want to thank you guys so much for all the support you guys have given me and shown me on my previous videos. You know, we made about 20 to 30 videos this off season, you know, showcasing fantasy football, and there's going to be a lot more to come. So if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. Like I said, there's going to be a lot more coming, and I'll see you guys next time. Good luck in your drafts.